All right, Witchslayer, welcome to 69 Faces of Rock. How are you guys doing today?
Good. Hello, Mark.
All right.
Good to see you.
Introduce yourself and tell me what you do in the band.
Jeff Allen, lead singer.
Ken Mandat, lead guitar.
All right. Jeff, what were the beginnings of Witchslayer?
In regards to how we started,
Yes.
well, we all came from the northwest suburbs of Chicago, Mount Prospect, Des Plaines, that area. Most of us went to high school together. Let's put it this way. In my high school, Paul Speckman was there, Sean McAllister was there, a lot of guys from Witchslayer, Thrust. We all were in the same high schools, Warcry, and we all met up at a party once, like 1979, 1980, went to a party, and there was an open mic in the basement. Somebody was selling their house and the kids throwing a house party, and they had an open mic in the basement, and someone asked me to sing because they knew I could sing. So I jump in there, and it's Paul Speckman on bass, and this guy Tom McNeely on guitar, another guy Ken Whitling on drums, and we started just doing covers, like Sabbath covers and Priest covers, and I started singing. And then afterwards, two guys approached me about joining their band, and it was Craig McMahon and Tom McNeely. They needed a lead singer, and that was the beginning of Witchslayer. We started playing in the drummer's basement in Des Plaines.
How did you come up with the name Witchslayer?
Well, we were thinking of all kinds of names for the band, and we were all really majorly into Angel Witch. And somebody was like, "Why don't we go with Witchslayer?" Because we wanted the word witch in there, I suppose, you know. And so everybody's like, "Yeah, Witchslayer. That sounds like a cool name. Let's go with that." And that's before we heard there were all these witch bands out there, you know. But we settled on Witchslayer, and it sounded good at the time, and we went with it.
Any real witches in Mount Prospect, Des Plaines area?
Not that I know. Probably is.
They all got slayed.
We killed them all, yeah.
What did you want to be like at the time?
As far as a singer, I really liked the way Paul Di'Anno back in Iron Maiden was back then. I liked his image. I liked that leather, the grit that he put into his performance, all the studs he'd wear. I thought that was a cool metal, 80s metal persona. That's what I was driving for when I was starting.
How would you describe the style you developed as a band? Yeah, as a band actually.
As a band?
Yeah.
We have sort of a European sounding style because we were influenced by a lot of the new wave of British heavy metal bands. So it's unique. It's definitely not a U.S. sounding band. It's more definitely influenced by Priest and Maiden, Angel Witch, those types of bands.
Now, by 1983, you released a very successful demo. You had an appearance on Metal Massacre.
Yeah.
What response was it getting?
Well, you know, we were kids when we did that, and we put a demo together. We got a professional engineer involved. But, you know, in order to get a label deal back in that time, you had to have a demo tape to shop around. So we were sort of winging it like we've been doing our entire career as a band. And we got the demo together, and we started sending it out to labels, and really back then metal was just ignored for the most part. It wasn't played on the radio. It was very underground back then. And it was the same time that Metallica put out No Life Till Leather demo. And we went out to California, Craig and I and some guys from Warcry, to see the US Festival in 1983. They had a heavy metal day. And while we were there, we did a cold call to Brian Slagle, and we had our demo tape, and we handed it to him. And that got the whole Chicago thing going with Metal Massacre IV, and it was a tool we used to get on Metal Massacre IV, that demo tape. So we never expected it to take off the way it did and still be coveted to this day, 40 years later. But it worked. It was a raw demo. It was good. We were very well rehearsed at the time we did it. and it did get us on Metal Massacre IV, and we should have been mature enough to leverage off of that, but we just didn't have any management. We're sort of winging everything we did.
Ken, you were not in Witchslayer at that time, but you were musically active. Tell me what you were doing.
Well, at that time I was in the process of forming Damien Thorne. And when Damien Thorne was in the early stages, and we were friends with these guys from Witchslayer and the guys from Etrope and Trouble and Warcry, and we used to, if we weren't rehearsing, we would go and watch these guys rehearse. And you know, it was kind of like a close-knit kind of little community. You know, we were all friends. All the bands kind of helped each other out, you know. And, you know, me and Jeff stayed in contact after all these years, and, you know, and we talked, and, you know, he was expressing how he really regretted never getting that album out, and that the other guys didn't want anything to do with it, so, you know, I offered to help.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. Hold on. So, successful demo, great appearance on Metal Massacre. How come nothing came out of it?
I think we were spurned out as a group. You know, we've been banging around for 4 years at that time, and we were not getting any success as far as labels go. You know, back then it cost a fortune to put an album out. I mean, thousands of dollars to put an album out. And we were like 19, 20, 21-year-old guys. We didn't have that kind of money. And
We still don't have that kind of
and I think what nailed the coffin was we were supposed to play open for Accept on the Balls in the Wall tour at the Chicago Metro. And, you know, it was advertised on the major radios that we were playing. And we were starting to build a following. And we get to the Metro to set up, and the band just nixed our whole performance. They told us to go fuck off, basically. And, you know, we got a view of the side of the business that was not pretty. And I think at that time we were just defeated, we were just beat. And in hindsight, we should have got on that stage at the Metro and played that show, because it was a sold out crowd. And we should have got on the road at that point and just played out. But we just didn't have the maturity to see it.
So when the band was away, what did you do during your downtime?
As far as not performing, and when the band broke up?
Did you do anything musical?
No, not really. I was sort of done, sort of burnt out. Just followed another career. You know, I had regrets because I did think we had potential. I think Witchslayer at the time, in like 1983 or 4, was on the cusp. You know, all we had to do was put a record out and tour. And we had another deal, like Johnny Z from Megaforce Records. He was looking at signing us. That fell through. But, you know, it was like all these woulda, coulda, shoulda moments, you know. And I was just like burned out on it, man. You know, we had been doing it for a while.
Tell me about the process of bringing this band back now.
Bringing this band back?
Yeah.
Well, I knew we had an album, maybe an album and a half's worth of material. And it started with putting an album out. I told Ken, I go, you know, I think Witchslayer was a band that underachieved, that we should have had success back then had we gotten an album out. I said, I regret not putting that album out because I think we have great material that held up. It's still to this day. I think it holds up. So I told Ken, if you're willing, let's just put an album out. Let's just put the shit out there to put it out. To say that we have a Witchslayer album we can hold in our hands. And I had tried it before Ken agreed to do it with a number of other musicians, and it never got the sound right. Because I realized I had to do it in Chicago with Chicago musicians to get the right sound. Because Chicago had a certain doom heavy metal sound that anywhere else I tried it was just not the same. And so that's what started the ball rolling. I was like, let's at least put an album out. And then if anything comes, and then if we get this album out, we'll probably be able to play Keep It True in Germany, and we'll probably be able to play something in Chicago, but I didn't expect anything more than that. So we did the album, and the album, you know, I brought in Sean McAllister, who was in Trouble, and he was the original bassist in Witchslayer. I tried to get all the original guys back, but nobody wanted to really do it because it's a ton of work.
Yeah.
And but I brought Sean in to sort of help produce it, keep the sound real and true to form.
Yeah, and originally Sean it was going to be me and Sean putting the album together. And Sean started the process with me, and he plays on 2 tracks on the album. But when we realized that it was going to probably be more than just recording the album, and we realized we were going to be doing gigs and making this a band, I think Sean couldn't commit because of physically he's just not able to do the rigors of going out traveling and doing live shows. So Sean stepped down from the bass player role and just kind of stayed on as the executive producer. He's our consultant. We run everything by Sean, you know, because we value Sean and his opinion, you know.
He toured with Trouble, so he knew what it was all about.
So then, you know, we needed to fill the band. We needed to replace the bass player. Originally, the drummer was going to be Sean Johnson, another Chicago drummer. And we started doing demos, me, Sean Johnson, and McAllister. And just like McAllister, Sean came to the conclusion that he was just too busy. He runs a recording studio and has a lot of things going on, and he just couldn't commit the time. So I told Jeff, I said, well, I'm going to bring in Mick Lucid, who's playing with me and Damien Thorne currently, and we needed to have a great drummer, and Gabriel is the best drummer in Chicago, in my opinion. So we reached out to Gabriel and brought him on board.
Ken, how did you react when you were offered to handle the guitar parts for the new Witchslayer album?
Well, I was familiar with the material for a long time, because I was hanging around when those guys were writing that stuff back in the early 80s. And, I know how Craig plays, so I was really familiar with how, what he does on the guitar. But I didn't really want to do Craig, When we approached this record, we wanted to keep the material true and not rewrite parts or change arrangements and things like that. But the idea was I was going to play Craig's parts, but I'm going to play it like myself.
You had to have some musical leeway. I mean,
how did you know you were the right person for the job?
Well, because I know that style, and I knew that I could do a better job, to be honest with you.
How long did it take you to learn the material and make it work?
Well, it didn't take very long to learn the material at all. The problem that we had, which was really me and Gabriel, the drummer, is all we had to go on with that material was old, the old demo, which now is the quality that's out there that we had to reference was pretty poor.
And 2 live tapes too.
Yeah, and 2 live tapes. The rest, the material that's not on the demo, all we had was some old 40-year-old live recordings, which you can barely kind of even hear what's going on, So I was able to understand enough to figure out exactly what was being played on there. But because they were live recordings, the timing of everything was very rushed and kind of skewed. So me and Gabriel had to, and Gabriel did an amazing amount of work. We had to break down all those songs and actually determine what the correct tempos were, and then we had to, for the recording process, we had to create custom click tracks with the various tempo changes and things like that to make that music work. To make it sound like it's supposed to sound. Because on those live tapes, you know, those guys had a lot of adrenaline. They rushed through everything. So we knew we couldn't record it that way. It would have sounded terrible. But, you know, me and Gabriel, you know, we're educated musicians. You know, I mean, we know music and we knew what to do. It was just a lot of work getting from point A to point B.
Tell me about the recording process.
With the new album?
Yeah.
Well, like Ken was just referring to, is getting the old material off of analog recordings. A couple of them were bootlegs, and digitizing it, making the click tracks.
Yeah, so I could probably answer that better.
Yeah.
So what we did is, you know, I went through all the material and roughly recorded a demo tracks of just guitar, me playing through the arrangements. Then I had to give that to Gabriel, and then we had to sit down and we had to actually determine the tempos of all the songs and you know, the forms of all the songs. And then, because we had to create these click tracks, we started with the drums and a scratch guitar, and he would create the click track, he would give it to me, I would put a scratch guitar for him to work with, and then he went in the studio, recorded the drum tracks with my scratch guitar. We didn't want to record it live altogether because we wanted all those tempos to be exact. We wanted those songs. We didn't want to have rushed parts or have any little mistakes here and there. So we put the drum tracks down with my scratch guitars, and then me and Mick and Sean played on a couple tracks, bass tracks, and then I just went in and redid all my scratch guitars with real live guitar tracks. We did all the bass tracks, and then vocals were last. You know, so I pretty much handled all the recording. We recorded all that stuff at my house. Except for the drum tracks, we did drum tracks in a studio. But once we had the real drum tracks, then we did all the other instruments in my home studio, and that was it. We mixed it, and then we sent it off to Massive Mastering. They did all the mastering. You know, those guys too. They run Massive Mastering. They were also in Chicago metal bands back in the 80s, you know, so it's a close-knit thing. We wanted to keep everything kind of close to home.
Everything was done by Chicago artists.
Jeff, once the news of Witchslayer coming back got out, how did people react, or like metal world?
A lot of them were just skeptical until they heard it. They're like, this is 40-year-old music. It's an old band, you know. How good can it be? You know.
Yeah, there was a lot of, before the stuff came out, a lot of people were excited because a lot of people were always hoping that stuff would come out.
The hardcore fans. Yeah.
But, you know, anytime when you know, Jeff being the only original member, anytime you have other people playing on the albums, a lot of the old, like, true fans early fans of the band, they say, well, it's not Witchslayer if it doesn't have the original guy. But I think the important, and we appreciate that, you know, but the important thing was that we had the original vocals, and that we knew that we had to have that album sound like an '80s Chicago metal band, and that's why I wanted to do the recording part of it myself, because if we would have went into a fancy studio, and if we, early on we talked about maybe hiring a producer to come in, if we would have did that, we would have maybe had a better quality recording, but I think it would have lost that. We wanted it to sound like we recorded it in 1983, but with a modern quality to it, and I think we did that. I think it came out pretty well.
I think it's better because the musicianship is
Which kind of brings me to my next question. Personally, did it meet your expectations?
What's that?
Personally, did the album meet your expectations?
It surpassed it, really, because the quality of the musicianship. If I'd taken the original band today and tried to get them to do this album, it wouldn't have came out as good as it did. Because these guys are professional musicians, they're still playing to this day. They had the chops. The other guys, would have been coming back trying to get their musicianship back to what it was. Not even close to what it came out to be. I thought the material was great. I thought the music we wrote was great. And taking guys today, it just made it even better, as far as I'm concerned.
What about you, Ken?
Yeah, when we talked about doing this in the beginning, when we first set out to doing it, we were telling each other that, we're going to do this, and if in the end, it doesn't meet our expectations, we're just not going to put it out. We're going to scrap it.
So now...
So I had motivation to make sure that it sounded the way I heard it in my head, and we took the time to make it happen, and I think it came out better than I probably thought it was going to, although I knew that it could come out great, and we're happy with it.
I didn't want it to be a bunch of old guys from the 80s trying to recapture their glory. I wanted it to be a solid album, a good album, and I think we did that. We achieved it.
So now the album is out in the public. What reaction is it getting?
It's getting a great reaction. I think it was in the top lists of albums from last year across the world. We were getting people all over the planet who are listening to it. So that says in itself that it's a successful album.
Typically you always, you get good reviews, you get bad reviews. There's always usually a kind of a mix. But I really haven't seen very much negative press at all. Everything's been super positive, and people that have been buying our stuff online and ordering our stuff and meeting us at, everybody's loving it. So you can't complain, man.
You can't please everybody, though. There's going to be the new metal fans that hate old school metal. I think for what we put out, it meets expectations. We didn't try to be something we're not.
The former members, have they heard the recordings?
The drummer has, and he may be here tonight.
Okay.
He's very supportive. The guitarist has moved on in his life in many ways. He wants nothing to do with it. I tried to get him involved, Craig McMahon. And the bassist, Rick Manson, wants nothing to do with metal anymore. He's done. I tried to get I gave everybody an option to come back and be part of this project. None of them had, a lot of them were just too busy, or they had moved on in their life of music. So.
Recently you did an appearance on Keep It True Festival in Germany.
Right.
What were the reactions like?
Oh, it was pretty positive. That was pretty good.
First European show?
Yeah, I thought it was great. We had a full house, which is kind of hard to do when you're playing at 3 in the afternoon. A lot of times the crowds stay outside and they don't come in until the headlining bands. But we had an afternoon slot, and when we played, the house was packed from front to back. And that place gets crazy. I played there before with Damien Thorne. And if you're an underground metal band and you're gonna play any German show, that's the show to play. Not Wacken or any of those super big commercial fests. Keep it true is the place to be.
Jeff, you live in Colorado now, right?
Right.
The rest of the guys are in Chicago. How do you make it work?
Just make it work, man.
Airplanes.
Travel. Yeah. I make it work. I come in for rehearsals. You know, we've had about half dozen to a dozen rehearsals.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of rehearsals because of that fact. So, you know, we just make sure that when we do get together to rehearse, you know, he's got to fly in, and you know, we rehearse actually in Indiana, so you know, there's a lot of us traveling to get to rehearsal. So when we get there, we make the best of it.
I think that's the reality of today.
Yeah, and everybody works on their own. Everybody's pretty disciplined to like stay on top of their playing and their chops, and you know, stay fresh with the material. So when we get together to rehearse, it's usually like clockwork, you know.
Ken, you also do Damien Thorne. What's going on with that band?
We're just on hold right now. You know, so much going on with the Witchslayer thing, and so Damien Thorne's just on a pause right now, and we don't have any live shows planned. We did one last year. We got together. We played here. As a matter of fact, at Reggie's for the tribute to Eric Wagner of Trouble, and that was the last thing we've done. Coming up in a couple months, I'm going to start working the label that put out the Witchslayer vinyl. I'm going to work with them. We're going to next year put out a big Damien Thorne release. Mostly re-release of the first album and some of the parts of the other albums and some demos that never been released, and put like a kind of a greatest hits kind of thing out, and then we'll see after that what happens. But we don't have any live shows planned.
Jeff, is a possibility of writing some new Witchslayer material? Something
we're talking about it. That would be the next step. I have still about a half an album worth of material from the 80s, which we haven't done. But, you know, it takes a lot of effort to make we want a follow-up album be as good as we can make it be. We don't want to just put one out to put one out. So it's going to take some work.
Yeah, we are planning on doing a follow-up album. But I don't know how long it's going to take.
Got to fit it in.
You know, we wanted to get these couple of shows out of the way, and then later on this summer, you know, I've already started coming up with some song ideas and things like that. But later on this summer, we're gonna get together and start banging out some tunes and see what comes of it. You know, but possibly maybe something. Early next year, possibly, hopefully.
It took 4 years to get this current album out, and we did it through the pandemic. So
finally, when you look back now at what is possible and what could have been, do you have any regrets?
You know, that's everything in life. You know, anything you do, there's woulda, coulda, shouldas. You know, that's the thing to be successful. You got to just go for it, and without a plan B, you have to just get out there and just hit the road and grind it out. And if that success will come from that effort. But you can't have any regrets in life. Everything you do is for a reason. You know, you logically at the time you think this is the path I need to go down, and you go down, and you can't look back. And when you're in a band, that's like being in a marriage. You got 4 or 5 guys you're dealing with, so it's hard to keep it going. You know, it's amazing. You look at Metallica that they're where they're at, but there are times that Metallica probably should have broken up. You know, they lost Cliff Burton. They're on their third bassist. They had to bring in a psychiatric counselor at one point because they had a lot of inner conflict. They had a lot of addictions. You know, there's a lot of things you go through keeping a band going.
Well, that's why the guys that are in this band, Witchslayer now, that's why we got the guys that we got, because there's no drama, there's no egos, everybody is like brothers, we get along great.
There's no dysfunction.
There's no dysfunction, which
Everyone's
is
been
amazing.
canceled. Went through canceling.
Yeah, so, you know, we all get along great. You know, we've all known each other for long periods of time, and we know how each other operates, and we respect each other, and it works, you know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.